Hi, I'm Tara, and welcome to Les Do Books. Email me at tara@thelesbianreview.com with any questions or comments, or come join the Facebook group, The Lesbian Review Book Club. I'm thrilled because I'm joined today by Astrid Ohletz, Managing Director at Ylva Publishing. Astrid is here today to talk about other people's books. Authors and publishers are readers too, so I'm asking her about what lesbian fiction she loves. Welcome, Astrid.
Hello, Tara.
I also can't believe I forgot to say, you are also Emma Wyman, author of Heart Surrender, which is a pretty awesome erotic romance.
Thank you. Yeah, that was back in the day when I still had time and had space to write, but thank you. Unfortunately, publishing has taken over my life. But maybe in the future there will be another book. Yeah, thanks for having me. May I just say in the beginning that if I stumble to find a word, or if people wonder about my maybe funny accent, I don't know, I'm German. So excuse myself if I sound weird at times.
I don't think you sound weird at all. And I think people are going to love hearing your accent. I hear all the time about accents from people on this show.
Right. Good.
So, can you tell us about your journey as a reader and how you first discovered lesbian fiction?
Yeah, it's fun. When we talked about what are we going to talk about, I really had to sit down and had to think back, when did the journey start? And it actually started when I was 17, which is more than 30 years ago now. When I was 17, I stumbled into a mainstream bookstore thinking that there must be a lesbian fiction. I didn't even know what to call it back then, you know. There must be a book about women like I am on the shelf somewhere. And I found a book. It was Patience and Sarah by Isabel Miller. And I took the book and I went to the counter, and I was sure the person on the counter would shout across the whole bookstore, "Hey, how much is this lesbian book that lady is going to buy here?" And I was prepared to die, but it didn't happen. So good for me.
That is good.
Yeah, it was, over 30 years ago, times were really different. So I went home with the book, not knowing anything about the author. And I loved it. And I was so lucky that my first lesbian fiction book actually has a happy ending. Patience and Sarah is set in the 19th century, so you don't really need to expect a happy ending. And one of the women is an educated painter with a bit of like a money background, and the other one a cross-dressing farmer. And naturally, not everybody is excited about their relationship, and they don't have anyone else who is like them. So they're stumbling along and the family is fighting them. But there's a happy ending. And I could have found other books. So I was very lucky finding that one with a happy end for me. And when I did some research, let me just add that I found it really amazing that this book was self-published in 1969. We all believe that, yes, self-publishing is something fairly new, but the author self-published it in 1969, printed 1,000 copies, and hand-sold the book on the New York street corners. Now that's dedication, isn't it?
That's amazing.
Yeah. Unfortunately, 17 was also the time when I discovered, or when I stumbled into fundamentalistic Christianity. And so while knowing I was a lesbian, and after reading that book, I still decided that this isn't how I wanted to live my life. And I went into Christian groups that were very strict. So meaning you're not allowed to be a lesbian, or you're not allowed to live as a lesbian. Let's pray the gay away. There was demon deliverance. Let's not go into the details, but it wasn't a fun time. So I didn't read another lesbian book for a long, long time, around 6 years or so. But I still have a copy. I actually bought a new copy a couple of years ago of Patience and Sarah, and I love to reread this book from time to time.
That's wonderful.
Did you ever read it?
No, and I feel like I need to. I feel like I'm slowly filling in kind of those books that a lot of people have said were fundamental to them. So last year I read Curious Wine and Swashbuckler.
Yeah.
So I think this might need to be the year for Patience and Sarah. At some point, I'll work myself up to the Well of Loneliness.
Yeah. Maybe first the Well of Loneliness and then a book with a happy ending.
Yeah. Okay, that's a good plan. So you said it was about 6 years before you read another book. What was that next book?
The next book was first a movie for me. And then I read the book. So the next one I'm talking about is the book Fried Green Tomatoes at the Whistle Stop Cafe by Fannie Flagg. But first I watched the movie, and I have to say, I watched the movie when I was about to be very critical about the Christian surroundings I am, where I didn't believe anything I was told anymore, and I was struggling. And a friend, actually my friend Ylva, from whom the name Ylva Publishing comes, she's from Norway. We were on Bible school together and we made friends. And she said to me, Astrid, you have to go and see the movie Fried Green Tomatoes. It's such a great movie about platonic friendship between women. And I was like, yeah, okay, sure, why not? And I sat in cinema and I was shocked and hurt and elated, and there was so much going on inside me. The one thing I knew for sure was this is not about a platonic friendship.
No.
But the thing is, I read the book later. The thing is, in the book, I didn't know, I read it up. Fannie Flagg actually had a relationship with Rita Mae Brown and also with another actress called Susan Flannery, who was part of The Bold and the Beautiful, a series that ran in Germany for years as well. And when I watched the movie, there was subtext. The only thing happening in the movie is subtext. But for all of us, I believe it's like, my God, it's like Xena, this is like subtext. There's definitely more going on. And when I read the book, I was like, what did they do with the movie? In the book, the relationship between Ruth and Itchy, and let me just say, if anyone hasn't read the book or watched the movie, which I can't believe, go and see it or go and read the book. The audiobook is great as well. It takes place in the 30s in Alabama, and the other part of the movie is taking place in today, actually 1984 or something, or 1990. It's about an old woman telling another woman the story of Ruth and Itchy. And Ruth and Itchy is, in the book, very clearly, they are in love, they have a relationship, and there's nothing platonic about it. It's very open in the book. And in the movie, you have to guess. And I was really furious about, I still love the movie, but I was really furious that they killed the relationship in the movie. There is a food fight that is meant to symbolize a sex scene, which is like, okay. So go read the book. For me, when I went out of the cinema, I was like, I didn't do well for several weeks because I was already struggling with my Christian thing. And there was that movie that kind of awoke my queer longing, which I, stuffed down for years, and suddenly there it was on the screen. This is what I really wanted. So Fried Green Tomatoes is always going to be very, very special for me, because I'm sure my journey would have continued anyhow, but it was something inside me exploded or imploded when I watched the movie and then when I read the book. And then I left my Christian surroundings. So that was the second book that really meant a lot and still means a lot to me.
So amazing that it came into your life when you needed it.
Yeah, or not. Back then I felt more like, I really don't need this. But in the end, yeah, it really helped me to realize that this is what I want, like a life, to be free and to just be myself. Yeah. So yeah, very, very good timing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So where did you go after that with your reading?
Then I thought, I need to read more. There must be more books. Unfortunately, we're talking then 23 years ago or so, we didn't have a lot of lesbian fiction books in Germany. I mean, Patience and Sarah was lesbian fiction, but still more mainstreamy lesbian fiction at that time. Fried Green Tomatoes, I was able to buy the book because of the movie. Otherwise, I don't know if I would have found it. It wasn't easy. We had some mysteries translated from English, but the German lesbian books, there wasn't a lot there. And the English books were really, really hard to come by and very expensive, because back then they had to be ordered in the US and you paid like 4 times of what you pay for a paperback, and ebooks didn't exist back then. So what I did was I remembered The Color Purple, the movie, and I remembered that there was a kiss between women in that movie. So I went into the library and discovered Alice Walker and read The Color Purple. I read Simone de Beauvoir, I read Gertrude Stein, I read whatever else I got my hands on. But I think The Color Purple is actually, it was a very, very important book for me, because the relationship between the two women isn't really the main thing in the movie, but it is very positively portrayed and they have a happy ending. So, and the other books I read by Alice Walker, I have to say, she's really one of my favorite authors and my heroes. So Color Purple, I want to give, I'm sure he's not listening, but I want to give kudos to Steven Spielberg, because he didn't tone down the relationship between the two characters. We do have the kiss, we do have the happy end, very obviously. So, and funnily enough, Color Purple came out in 1984, so more than 6 years earlier than Fried Green Tomatoes. So that I find very interesting. So thanks, Stephen, for that. Helped me a lot.
Yeah, he's probably not a fan of the podcast, but maybe someday he will hear that. Because you're right, that was huge.
Yeah, hashtag him when you...
Oh my God.
Hey, Steven Spielberg, listen to my podcast.
No, but it's some people, when I discussed this on Facebook about Fried Green Tomatoes, the movie, guessing and having subtext, someone said, but it was a time when Ellen DeGeneres hasn't been out and it was so early. And I'm like, yeah, but it was actually... Fried Green Tomatoes is 6 years younger than The Color Purple, and for whatever reason, thanks Steven Spielberg for not killing this for us in a bad way.
Mm-hmm.
And people read, I mean, the book isn't easy to read, Color Purple. I love it as an audiobook. I'm really into audiobooks at the moment, because I think it's easier to listen to as to read, actually. Yeah, it's a great book. Really worth reading.
Beautifully written.
Yeah.
Like, it's so... I found that with all of her books that I've read too. Like, she's just so good. Like, everything she writes is so beautifully written, no matter how difficult the subject matter.
Yeah. That's the thing. She doesn't have like happy books. She always tackles difficult subjects, but she does it with a grace and with a magic that, yeah, I just love her. Yeah. So that was the third book that really meant a lot to me. But then my library was out of books, and there like in the bookstores, there were 10 translated mysteries into German. So after 5 weeks, I've been out of what to read. So what I did was go to the internet, and then I discovered the world of fan fiction.
Yay!
And let me tell you, I mean, by then, my now wife, Daniela, and I, we've been together, and she was like, I was reading at 2:00 in the morning. I discovered a world that filled my life with so much happiness. And Daniela was like 2:00 in the morning, don't you want to sleep? And I couldn't. I just needed to read all those stories, you know. And I was lucky in a way that back then I also had a job where I had a lot of free time in my job, and I had the internet. So I think I basically read the whole Academy of Bards during my work hours.
That's a lot of reading.
That's a lot of reading, yeah. And then through Melissa Good, actually, I discovered that some of these fan fiction authors were also published. And that I was able to get those books on Amazon, which was, sorry to say, bookstores, a lot cheaper than buying them in the German bookstores. And that is when my reading really started. And we had so many good publishing houses back then, some of whom unfortunately closed doors. But there was a universe of reading material for me out there. Lots of amazing stories. This is where I stumbled across Jay. I've read her Conflict of Interest as fan fiction back then, and I wrote her an email in English saying how much I love the story. And then she wrote mail back in English, and I answered her in English. And somewhere along the line, we discovered that we were both from Germany. Which was really funny. And then we corresponded in German. But yeah, I can't thank all those writers of fan fiction enough. They've really, their stories meant so much to me. And I think that also it's easier in Germany now to get books, and ebooks help a lot. But I know that also Archive of Our Own, so many people who don't have a bookstore to go to and get a book. Also countries where you can't easily get a lesbian fiction book. These free stories are so important on the internet.
Absolutely. Well, I've heard several authors on this show, and other authors and readers that I've talked to just offline, have said that, fan fiction changed their life or saved their life, that's how they figured out their queerness, or that's how they figured out, oh, hey, it's actually okay that I'm gay or I'm bi or whatever it is, and it's free.
Yep.
And there's so much of it.
And most of the stories have a happy ending, which I find so important, because a lot of the classic lesbian fiction books, or the older ones, some have a happy ending, others don't. And I think we're all sick of lesbian or bi or trans women getting killed or ending up in an asylum or whatever. So fan fiction with, hey, love between women is great, and here's a happy ending, was like, I think, I'm a pessimist, I'm very cynical, but yeah, that totally changed my life, all these happy stories out there.
Well, and it's kind of amazing when you look at fan fiction really kind of hitting it big in the 90s with the xenofiction, and how we wouldn't have the current lesbian fiction landscape that we have now without it, where we have this like rich community of women writing these stories with happy endings all the time. So if you can't afford to buy new books all the time, you can still go to fan fiction. Like, there's a lot of choice for anybody.
Absolutely. And yeah, there are some stories that are not that good, but there are some real jewels out there. Amazing stories, amazing authors. Yeah, I don't have so much time anymore to read because of the many submissions I have to read or allowed to read, but fan fiction will always have a very special place in my heart, and I'll be at ClexaCon London, I think, in November, and I just submitted a panel to them yesterday. I hope they accept, about where I want to talk with 3 friends about fan fiction and how cool fan fiction is.
I love that. I hope you get to do it.
Yeah, I hope so too.
I'm going to ask you a tricky question.
Oh, go.
What is your current favorite fandom to read from?
My problem is I don't have one anymore. I'm lost because I was totally into the 100, like Clexa, and then they killed her off. And let me tell you, there were 2 people in this office. I'm one of them, and the other one isn't my wife. We're 2 people. We were crying the next day. I remember Sam, our cross-media expert, they went into the door on Friday morning when work started. We looked at each other and we both had tears in our eyes because we loved the series so much. And Sam said they were on a train and they met another person whom they knew, and the other person was like, "Did you see?" And the other person also had tears in their eyes. And I think something inside me actually broke with Clexa.
Did you see, I don't know if you're reading it or, because Andy Marquette is rewriting season 3 as a fanfic.
I have to be honest, I stopped watching that day. I didn't continue to watch. We at Ylva, we have some authors who actually, K.L. Hughes is the most famous one, who have written some really wonderful Clexa fan fiction. I read some Supergirl stuff afterwards, but I have to admit I never got really into the series, but I'm a sucker for Ice Queens. Who am I talking to?
I know, right?
But I never really got into the show, and Wynonna Earth, unfortunately, isn't for me. It's not really my thing, personally. And maybe I'm not over Clexa. I don't know. I haven't attached to another series since Lexa was killed off.
So Wynonna Earp, I've only seen the first season. I really enjoyed it, and it's actually filmed not too far from where I live. So every so often there'll be a scene where I'm like, hey, I know that place, which is kind of cool. But Lee Winter,
yeah,
and her friend Charlotte,
Double Trouble, I call them.
Double Trouble, yes. I was already a fan of Devil Wears Prada fanfiction, but they got me so far into it that's just where I live now. Whenever I take a break from my reviewing list, it's to read more Devil Wears Prada fanfiction, because it's the Ice Queen, it's a workplace romance, and it's age gap, which for me are 3 of my absolute jams.
I'm totally with you. It's a movie I rewatch at least once a year, even though I know most of the dialogue by heart now. And I also am very proud that within the last 14 months or so, I had 2 people, I forced them to watch it for the first time. I couldn't believe when they said, I've never seen it. So I was now sit down, watch. Yeah.
Yeah.
I love it. Yeah, that's true. But yeah, I think that as weird as it is thinking about it, I think that honestly, I'm still not over the whole Lexa thing. It's weird, isn't it? But I was so invested emotionally. I was so happy. I was so finally a series like that. And then smash, boom. And wow, yeah, that was tough, I think, for a lot of us.
I don't think that's weird at all. It's okay, so it's not a TV show or a movie, but I actually felt the same way about the Mass Effect video game series and the way that it ended, because I invested in... Have you played it?
I have started, but
okay.
I just started playing video games, and it's a bit I'm not there with my learning curve.
That is understandable. So for anybody who hasn't played the games, we are so far off track, but that's okay. But for anybody who hasn't played the games, you get to choose if you are going to be Shepard you are this like space marine kind of character. I probably said it wrong. Somebody's going to get mad at me later. Whatever. You're a space soldier or space marine or whatever, and you get to choose to be either male shepherd or female shepherd, and you can give them a name. So I, of course, went female shepherd and invested heavily in this same-sex relationship with Liara, who is this amazing character. And that's the relationship they want you to have, whether you play femme shep or male shepherd. That's clearly the ultimate, is the relationship with Liara, and has all the best romance content. And there are 3 games, and at the end of the 3rd game,
don't spoiler that for me. Don't dare spoil that for me.
It broke my heart, is all I'm going to say.
And now I think if anyone wants to buy Mass Perfect from me, I think I don't want to play it anymore.
Oh my god. But the thing that I found was that fanfic let me right that wrong.
Yeah.
Because there were authors who did write the happy ending for them, and especially Ray D. Magden wrote amazing stuff that includes that. She also created a pairing between 2 other side characters in the series, Tivos and Aria, that for me are like, that's canon for me now. Like they're so well done. And I just loved that fanfic was able to heal my heart, because for a couple of years I was gutted.
Yeah. I actually read a lot of her fanfic, so I was never sure how to pronounce her name, but I've read a lot of her. She's written some wonderful The 100 fanfic as well. Shall I rescue our podcast and go back to books?
Yes, yes. Okay. I'm sorry.
No. I'd love to talk to you. I think I'm absolutely with you. Like, I could talk for hours about fanfic, and I think we totally underestimate the impact fanfic has had on so many on us, and still has. I just want to, if it's okay, I just want to point out 4 more books that really are very special to me.
Please do.
So one of them, and this is where this is very clever, because one of them is I have got to know as a fan fiction author. So see what I'm doing here. Fan fiction is cool. So here's a cool fan fiction author who started her own press. And that, again, I have problems pronouncing her name, but I think it's Susan X. Meagher.
I think it's Susan Meagher. I think she'll forgive us either way, because you're about to say really nice things about her book.
I read a ton of her stories as fan fiction first, and I love a lot of her stories. My favorite one of hers, and I reread it again at least once a year, is Almost Heaven. Have you read it?
I have. It is a beautiful book. It's not my favorite of hers. My favorite is All That Matters, which is not going to be a surprise to anyone. That's often well loved. But
yeah,
Almost Heaven, I felt like it just smacked me in the face. It was so different, and the premise was so different.
Exactly. And that's why, as I said, I like a lot of book of hers. I really do. And I also appreciate that her books are not short. She does write a good long story. And Almost Heaven, when I read it the first time, and if Susan is listening into this, let me know. I was always wondering if she got her inspiration from the movie Winter's Bone with Jennifer Lawrence. That is something I'd really like to know. I was thinking today, why do I like that book so much more than her other books I like? And I think it's because of the uncommon setting. And it is because it's not, quotation marks, only a love story, but there's a lot more to it. I love books where I learn stuff, where I get to meet people who live a life that I know not a lot about. I want to expand my horizon. when I read. And that is, I think, why I love Almost Heaven so much. I don't know any other lesfic book with a setting like this.
No, because isn't it like, it's like Appalachian Mountains.
Totally.
Like people who are making meth. Not either of the lead characters. Neither of the lead characters are making meth, to be clear.
Yes, it is. And that is why I was wondering about the inspiration, because Winter's Bone, where Jennifer Lawrence is playing the main character, is in that setting. And I remember when I watched the movie, I was like, oh, ideas. And I wondered if the same happened with Susan. It's a fabulous book. And also another author I discovered through fan fiction back then was Meghan O'Brien. I'm sure everybody knows Meghan O'Brien, and I'm a huge fan. She is, for me, the queen of erotic romance and of lesbian erotica. I love her books. And the thing is, my favorite book of hers is actually one where I read lately. She said it's the book that is her least sold book. And that is The Three.
Which is a wonderful book.
Yeah. And again, I was like, why do I really like it that much? And I mean, there are the hot sex scenes we expect from Meghan, but it's about a post-apocalyptic world. And also it's about three women finding love with each other. And it's about respectful relationship where three women end up in a respectful relationship with each other. And again, it's a story that expanded my mind. And it's my favorite book of hers. I love it. And I find it really a shame. I think more people should read it.
I know when I read it, it just felt like a big surprise. I didn't know that there could be anything like that in lesfic, and it was fairly early. It was probably within the first year that I started reading it, but it kind of felt like a blend of, it was like The Road meets The Handmaid's Tale.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Slightly less bleak, but only slightly. And so it has this like, there are difficult things that happen in this book. And there are difficult things that have happened to characters in this book. But it also ends up being a really interesting setting for exploring polyamory.
Yeah, exactly. And again, I think what really comes to my mind when thinking about it, it's done with so much respect. And even though there are the hot sex scenes, it's very clear this is not about sex, but it is about love. Equal, respectful love between three women. And I adore that book, yeah.
I think that's actually true of a lot of her erotic romances too, because I find what makes her books so much better and more compelling than a lot of the erotic writing out there is that it still is so emotional and often has like quite a lot of heart to it. And so the relationship development is just as important as the sex that's on the page. And the sex that's on the page always has a point. It's always driving character growth or relationship growth or helping to move the story along, but it's never just filling pages.
And that for me is really the difference between erotic romance / erotica and porn. With porn, it's mechanical. And porn is something I don't like to read. It just doesn't do anything for me. Erotic romance or well-written erotica, like Meghan does it, that's something I really love to read.
Yeah, me too.
I have two other books which I just want to mention very, very shortly because I think this thing is obviously long enough now between us. Let me just say, people go read Tipping the Velvet by Sarah Waters. Amazing, amazing, amazing book. Fabulous author, which I got to meet around 2 years ago. If you love historical fiction, I don't know how often I read that book and how often I watched the movie. The BBC turned this into a movie years and years and years ago. Go read it. If you love historical fiction, you can't not read this book. You really can't. And last but not least, and I hope that's okay, here's the thing. At Ylva, we don't publish books written by men because personally, that's a personal thing, my personal thing. I don't want to read lesbian fiction written by men. It's totally okay that it's out there, but it's my decision as a publisher. But there's a series. I love fantasy. I read so many urban fantasy books. I could build a castle, which is not a pretty good picture for urban fantasy books, but I read tons of them. I stumbled years and years ago about a series written by US guy called Jim C. Hines. I think that is how to pronounce his name. The first of his book in the series is the Stepsister scheme, and it's a fairy tale retelling with Cinderella and other princesses, but they are more like three angels for Charlie, like really tough as nails princesses. And one of them is a woman of color and a lesbian. And I was like, wow. And that guy wrote her story so beautiful and so amazing. And she gets a happy end that I actually wrote him an email thanking him for it. And he replied to me and we discussed the thing a bit. And so I want to give a shout out to him because we need lesbian characters in mainstream fiction, by women in mainstream fiction, trans people in mainstream fiction. So if it is done well as it is by him, thank you so much for writing this series. And that's my story.
That's a great story.
Yeah, unfortunately, I don't have that much time to read anymore. As I said, we get so many submissions, and usually I read nonfiction nowadays just to cleanse my palate a bit before reading another submission. But lesbian fiction totally has changed my life, and I wouldn't be where I am today without having discovered it and without having discovered fanfic.
Thank you for sharing that. So, Astrid, where can people find you online if they want to connect with you?
Well, they can write me a mail through our website, Ylva Publishing. I don't have a website on my own, and my Emma Weimann website is not running anymore as I don't write. But, and I'm on Twitter. I forgot I'm on Twitter. That is where you can connect with me. Be patient. I'd love to hear from people, but be patient because I get so many emails every day. My inbox is the bane of my existence. So it may take a while before I answer. But if anyone, especially, I just need to say this, if anyone has felt in any way touched by what I said about my Christian past and feels the need to reach out, I'd love you to do it because I know how hard that road can be. So yeah, please feel free to contact me.
That is all for this episode. Thank you so much, Astrid.
Thank you for having me.
I'm Tara. You've been listening to Les Do Books. Remember to email me at tara@thelesbianreview.com with your questions or comments. If you're an author who's interested in joining me on this show to talk about the lesfic you love or the trends that have you interested, please let me know. If you've enjoyed this episode, please check out the show notes where you'll find a Patreon link for the Lesbian Talk Show. Our patrons get exclusive content like bonus podcasts that no one else gets access to. You can also join our Facebook group, the Lesbian Review Book Club, to talk about these books and anything else you're reading and loving. To find this and many other great shows, all you need to do is search for the Lesbian Talk Show on iTunes, Podbean, or Stitcher.